Charges upgraded today against the officer who knocked on George Floyd's neck. Charges then filed against the other officers, the other 3 officers. Your thoughts on that?
Well, it was entirely appropriate. I was always of the mind that that the officer with his knee on the neck should have been charged at a higher level of murder, so he's charged with second-degree murder. And the others had to be charged as well because they were accessories. But more importantly, they held him down and put pressure on his back, which then constricted his breathing apparatus. So they were all participants. Now, the question is what's their level of intent? Each has different levels of intent, so it might strike me that the other 3 officers may very well wind up having third-degree murder charges or voluntary manslaughter. But certainly, the number one person who has his knee on the back of Mr. Floyd's neck, that person is certainly, in my view, guilty of second-degree murder because he had an opportunity at some point in time to release depression. When they said to him, we need to turn him over, he said no and continued to press down on Mr. Floyd's neck. So his intent to do bodily injury, to be hurtful, was clearly more well established, I think, than the others. But the others did participate, and so therefore, with some degree of responsibility. Now, I will tell you that that's all true, but whether they get convicted or not is a whole other matter because you got to deal with the criminal law. Jurors are not interested, likely, to convict police officers. But in this case, there's a more likely than that can happen than ordinarily because of this video. When you see Mr. Floyd basically die in front of you based upon a knee in his back of the neck, that in and of itself is very visceral for the jurors potentially, and I think could ultimately cause him to be convicted of second-degree murder, and certainly no less than third-degree murder.
Well, are you saying that the other 3 officers would have a better chance of not being convicted at all?
I think that 2 of them have a better chance of being certainly not convicted, and at the very least, the maximum conviction I think would be manslaughter for them. And I say that because this all happened as a consequence of being stopped. It wasn't planned. There was another guy who was in charge of this who was holding him down. They very well could have taken their lead from that person and said, he's trying to hold him down, he wants to take him in, and therefore I'm following orders in that sense. On the other hand, there came a point in time when one of the officers said, look, I think we need to turn this person over. And the lead person said no. So that being the case, they all have some degree of culpability. I do think that they will get and should be convicted of some offense. I don't view that they should be convicted of second-degree murder. At most, I think it's a third-degree murder and possibly even a manslaughter.
Mr. Burris, on a personal level here, you, as I've said, have covered a number of cases in California, renowned cases. We saw a change of venue with the Rodney King charges against the officers here. Can you ask for a change of venue? Well, you can ask, I assume, in Minneapolis, but will it make a difference? That video of the officer's knee on George Floyd's neck has gone around the world. I mean, where can you try this case? That someone wouldn't know about it.
Well, it's not that you try a case where no one knows about it. That's the case. When we did the Rodney King case, the whole world knew about it. We had to change the venue in the Oscar Grant case as well, from Oakland to L.A., but that was different because more people knew it Oakland than they did in L.A. My feeling about this is you cannot find a jury who does not know much about it. And so you then have to find jurors who have seen it all, but are prepared to say, I'm prepared to make a decision based upon what's being presented to me, and therefore does not have their minds completely made up. It will be challenging. Of course, it's always challenging in a case of high visibility. There will be a change of venue motion. I'm certain that they would prefer to get this case maybe up to someplace in rural Minnesota, or someplace where there's a different demographic, maybe more Republicans, conservative Republicans, mixed up, places like that. But at the end of the day, you can still pick a jury. I'm not of the view you can't pick a jury in places where a lot of people know about the information. I've done that before. I know that's entirely possible. It just requires more work. That's all.
Why is it so difficult, like in the Rodney King case, so difficult to get a jury to convict a police officer?
Because, in large measure, because people have great trust in police. and they want to believe that police always follow the law. And they don't want to convict a person who was involved in something that was situational, that just occurred. It wasn't planned. It was a product of the events that took place, and they're responding to it. They may have overreacted. They may have made a poor decision, but they don't want to ascribe criminal conduct to that. If you may remember, in the Oscar Grant case, we had the officer change the venue to L.A. to charge him with murder. At the end of the day, he was convicted of involuntary manslaughter, much to everyone's great surprise. But unless you have evidence that that person has a kind of a malicious intent, like the person happened in South Carolina, where he shot the man as he was running away after he tried to plant something else. Even in that case, the jury couldn't find him, all of them could find him guilty. So it's a challenge, and it's mainly because of we have all been ingrained to trust the police, to believe that they act properly. In the black community, we know that's not true. But the vast majority of people have a different perspective. I will say this, the video cameras have been a revolutionary change from Oscar Grant to Rodney King, Oscar Grant, and present day law policing has made all the difference. And I do think because of that, you're more likely to get convictions now than you were later because of the video cameras and the cell phone. So I think there's a new day coming in this whole area. And can you convict police, depending on how outrageous the conduct is. This case is particularly outrageous. I think convictions can come in this case much more easily than other cases.
Well, on a personal level, and as someone who has been a civil rights activist and has taken on so many of these cases, you see what you're seeing here with the protests that have really been going on for a week now. Does it give you hope for change?
I like to think that it does, but I will say that which a lot of people don't understand. Change in policing is very local. You don't have a national approach to trying to change policing. You have to change policing and the way they do their business on a city-by-city, county-by-county basis. So the protesting is important as it relates to the community which is directed at. Then you have people from that community who then go and analyze and work with the police or the city council or the city manager and or the mayor on how to change it. It doesn't come from this. What we have now is more like occupied United States. The real effort is when you get down to the counties and the cities and to the municipalities where you have policing at the local level in all forms. Not at the federal level, it's the local level. And so I have hope that the people who are involved in the protesting now will go back to their individual communities, organize around that, determine what police practices were for, and try to do something about it. That's a political process. That's a protesting process. But that's how America works best. Because then you've got to be able to hold the public officials accountable. That's the mayor, that's the city manager, that's the police chief. If you hold them accountable, they will make change.
More than hope, do you think that is going to happen this time?
Well, it's going to happen in certain places. I do think that's true. I think in urban areas where you have more political people, more sophisticated political people, people who are more energized around these issues, more urban people, I think that can likely happen. It certainly happened when you have law cases, like I've been involved in the Oakland Riders case up here for a number of years, very much like if you had the ramparts down in L.A. You can make changes if you have a combination of litigation and public protesting along with the ability to communicate and to make public officials uncomfortable. You have to make them uncomfortable.
We heard President Obama today call on mayors to review the use of force of their policing policies. Were you surprised last week when so many police chiefs and law enforcement came out and used the word murder in the death of George Floyd?
Well, it's never happened before, so I was surprised that it happened. But I also think that this is one thing you don't have to debate about. This was obviously on its face. Good police officers, even bad police officers, will have to concede that what happened here was fundamentally wrong. Calling it murder is another, that's a name calling.
Well, they did use that. They used a very strong word in the beginning,
They used strong
and this
words,
was
and
law
I'm not-
enforcement.
But I'm not surprised at that given the nature of this case. That rarely happens. But this case is so obviously bad that anyone looking at it could say, these men caused the death of this person based upon improper police tactics. That, in fact, is murder.
When you use the word bad, I mean, the officer there, Derek Chauvin, 18 times he'd been brought up for misuse of force, and he never went before a judge or jury.
Well, that is the issues about police departments and how they regulate and hold their officers accountable. If you continually not hold the officers accountable, they ultimately are going to do something very, very bad. And the department is responsible because they gave the encouragement by not punishing that person earlier. This person should have been punished. You got 18 different counts, even though you've only been found responsible twice. That's a pattern that exists. That's an attitude that exists. That exists in terms of how you think about the people you're relating to. And if you let that go on, what will ultimately happen, you'll have this situation like we have here, where a person feels they're not held accountable. And we can tell that by the manner in which he held the person down. He was very nonchalant about it. He had his foot on his knee on his neck, and he kind of pushed down on it, and he had his hands in his pocket. Like, he didn't care if he was inflicting real pain or cutting this person's airway off. That's because he's been given a license to do that because of the unwillingness to hold him accountable on prior
And
cases.
didn't even care he was being photographed.
And didn't care. Well, that's because he was accustomed to getting away with whatever he had to do. That's a function of leadership, a function of failure to have accountability, and a lack of transparency within the department. And that's what you get when that happens, when you let people think they can get away with stuff. And that happens in a lot of departments. A lot of departments that happens. And so that's what a lot of reform issue is about. How do you change this whole reporting process? What kind of internal affairs do you have? What kind of racial profiling issues? And what about your deadly force? When can you use deadly force? Are you monitoring it, or do you take the position always that the police? I'm involved in a case just today where a police officer shot and killed a looter. And the issue was, what was the looter doing at the time he shot and killed him? Well, that person will say it was justifiable because I think I saw him with a hammer. And the point is, the man never brought the hammer out. And so now it's the department, you want to support that conduct, and if you do, I can tell you that's going to cause an explosion within this community, because now the community is going to see more of this, more videos, and they're going to respond to those videos in a very aggressive way.
Okay, Mr. Burris, John Burris, California Civil Rights Attorney, we certainly thank you for your time. We're going to send it over to Conan Nolan, who's on the phone right now with DA Jackie Lacey. Conan.
That's right. The District Attorney for Los Angeles County, Jackie Lacey, joins us by telephone from, I assume, the Civic Center downtown. Madam District Attorney, the crowd that we're seeing outside the Hall of Justice, the headquarters for the District Attorney, headquarters for the LA County Sheriff, but according to Black Lives Matter on their Twitter account, they said this was going to be the focus of their demonstration today because they do not believe you have done nearly enough to hold rogue officers to the standard of justice and to prosecute officers for misdeeds and violations under color of authority within their community. How do you respond to that?
Conan, I respond to best LA County District Attorney's Office under my leadership has done more than Black Lives Matter has acknowledged. The cases these cases are difficult, they're very challenging to win, but notwithstanding that, we have filed over 21 use of force cases, and we have the only officer-involved shooting case in the state of California. And I just strongly disagree with them. I think we and the LA County District Attorney's Office do a good job of thoroughly reviewing those cases. And it's tough, Tony. You've covered this issue for a long time. They are very tough cases to file because of the law and the facts. And notwithstanding that, this office has looked at the facts and taken cases to trial and prosecuted officers for excessive force.
We should point out that it's not just Black Lives Matter, though, Madam District Attorney. The American Civil Liberties Union of Southern California has also criticized you, particularly for your decision a couple of years back in the case of LAPD Officer Clifford Proctor in the Brendan Glenn case. That was one where the police chief at the time, Charlie Beck, he even came out publicly and recommended that the officer be prosecuted, and you decided against it. Speak to that. They say that's emblematic of a larger problem within your office.
I say they haven't looked at the facts, they haven't read our report. In that particular case, the police chief came out and condemned that officer almost immediately before we even found out what happened. We did a pretty thorough investigation of that case. We talked to all of we reviewed the case of all of the witnesses that were there. That shooting occurred out in front of about, I would say, 6 to 7 civilian witnesses. We hired our own experts to take a look at and render an opinion. And while the shooting was troubling, in our opinion, if we had gone to trial, we would have lost. And part of the problem would have been the police chief's statement, in some sense, to come out and speak on a case like that, for the first time in the only cases that we spoke about, presented some issues for us. But be it as it may, we took a very, very careful look at that case, examined all of the evidence, and we felt we would not be able to overcome a self-defense claim. And so I just disagree with the ACLU. But here's what I want to say. It seems like with the critics, you can kind of never satisfy them. They refuse to acknowledge all the stuff we've done. Not only have we filed on officers, not only have we successfully convicted officers, but we've also trained officers on how not to escalate a situation involving those with mental health. We've trained 2,000 officers. And I've been an advocate for that. And so it's almost as though they focus on the bad stuff, but they really don't focus in on the whole picture, which is the good things that office is doing.
We should point out that you were the first African-American to become the district attorney for what is the nation's most populous county, the chief law enforcement officer. You're the first African-American woman, certainly. You're a daughter of the Crenshaw District, USC Law School, I believe. So you're somebody who has deep roots in this city. Can you describe for us a little bit about what your feelings when you see this sea of protests taking place, not just in the Civic Center, but other parts of Los Angeles, and the relationship, what you thought of what happened in Minneapolis, and frankly the announcement by the prosecutors there, Keith Ellison, the Attorney General, to advance the charges against one officer and bring to justice 3 others.
Believe it or not, I respect the protesters. I really do, because I think that this issue of African American men, in particular being racially profiled, dying at the hands of others, is an issue that troubles me. I've been black all of my life. I grew up in the black community, and so I understand how even one unjustified homicide that looks like it's racially motivated strikes terror and outrage and disgust. And I am disgusted by what happened in Minneapolis to George Floyd, as well as many of the other instances that we've witnessed. Be that as it may, I believe that you do that's where change happens. You do peacefully protest. I am really happy that the protest in the Civic Center today was peaceful. I didn't want to see anyone else hurt. And I really feel like we're on the same side, whether they know it or not. I believe in justice. I believe in what's right. And when I review these cases, Colin, I take this stuff so seriously. I don't just let someone roll a case out. I really examine it. I take a lot of time. If we need to spend money to recreate the scene, we do that. And I ask tough questions of my prosecutors. And sometimes it's just a bad case where, for instance, someone has a weapon, someone has a gun, someone's holding someone hostage. And while the death of people in those situations is painful, we're not going to succeed in prosecuting officers if, in fact, they have a legitimate belief that their life is in danger or someone else's life is in danger. So I want people to know I take those seriously. And as an African American, I definitely take my job seriously to make sure that any kind of injustice is addressed.
One of the agenda items, certainly for the leadership of Black Lives Matter Los Angeles, is to re-examine the spending priorities of the city and for the county of Los Angeles for that matter. They've asked the mayor of Los Angeles, different jurisdiction than yours, but for a defunding or an elimination of, or a partial at least elimination of the police budget. They believe they're spending too much on law enforcement, too much on the sheriff's department, and I assume too much on the prosecutorial side, which is your department. Is that a reasonable suggestion that perhaps you could be done with more and more resources, more money should be going into more preventative measures, social work, community organizations, to help prevent crime from taking place in the first place?
I don't really have the expertise to speak on the city budget, but what I'm told is there's a false number going around saying that over 50% of the budget is spent on police. In reality, in terms of the entire budget, I'm told it's not 70%. What I want to say is that whether we like it or not, we need the police, we need prosecutors to hold people accountable. If you don't, you will encourage criminal activity. But we also need more funding for mental health, for homelessness, and those things aren't mutually inconsistent. You can do both. You can fund the police department, but you can also fund social services.
Did police act in time, from your perspective, when prior to the peaceful demonstrations that we're witnessing right now outside in the Civic Center, outside your office, but did they not act fast enough when it came to the looting that you saw take place last week or earlier this week?
I think you needed, I think they did the best they could. No one could have predicted the explosion of criminal acts that happened while the police were distracted in peaceful protests. No one, I would defy anybody to say you knew this was going to happen. And given that they had to protect life over property, which is to make sure that the peaceful protests could take place and that no one got hurt, I think they did the best that they possibly could. And I just don't see where we could have, and hindsight is always 20/20. I don't see where they could have predicted that the looting, the burning, all of these things would occur in such a widespread area.
And I assume there'll be prosecutions. We have to wrap this up, but I assume your office will be making plenty of prosecutions on this?
Well, today, we released our press release. We filed 60 cases related to the crimes that were committed as a result of the civil unrest. We understand there'll be more coming our way, and we'll evaluate them as they come through. But sure, one of the complications of Conan is that the courts have been closed due to the civil unrest, and so we haven't really been able to have access to the courts the way we normally would. And also, we just don't know when police are going to be available to bring cases to us. They're busy trying to keep the peace, but eventually we'll sort it all out. But we'll be very busy in the prosecutor's office in the next couple of weeks.
Honorable Jackie Lacey, the District Attorney for Los Angeles County. Madam Prosecutor, thank you for taking the time.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure.
Now, once again, the downtown protests, and we can see at least a portion of them are beginning to move now, and we'll have more on that in just a moment. And in an effort to take the focus off the looting, Mayor Eric Garcetti invited a teenager from Inglewood, that was yesterday, you probably saw it live here on NBC4, to address the people of Los Angeles. Devon Pilgrim is 16 years old, and he shared a story about an incident when he was racially profiled by police. And today, Devon and his pastor sat down with NBC4's Jonathan Gonzalez to discuss just how to move the conversation about race forward. Here.
Maybe racism will be gone and all of this will be something of the past?
I pray that heavily. My name is Davion Pilgrim. I'm a 10th grader and I go to Windsor High School.
Who is Davion Pilgrim? Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Davion Pilgrim is a Christian boy. He has many different moods, but he's always somebody there that you always want in the corner.
I think the mayor felt our city needed you in our corner, in everyone's corner last night. You shared a very difficult story.
I was really just riding around in my neighborhood, and the police officer pulled me over. He was saying I was linked with the GTA, but I mean, it's okay. they called so many police officers, you know, and we were sitting there, but it wasn't me, so I ended up getting, you know, released, but I felt like I was really just being racially profiled.
When you got up there and you shared your story, you shared a painful truth that too many people face in this city. What have you heard in response to sharing that story?
When I shared my story, I got all the, really in response, I didn't really get no hate out of it, but I got more of a love, like, we understand and we support you out of that situation, and I was like, that's all I really need is the support, you know. We all can get through this together, you know, all we gotta do is come together and unify together and walk together.
Michael J. Fisher, and I'm the pastor of Greater Zion Church Family in Compton, California.
With regards to Davion, you're doing something.
Davion is a special guy. I won't even say boy. I think he represents very clearly where the next generation is going. And when the mayor was speaking about the youth, I said it's just a no-brainer. So I threw it to him. I knew he could handle it. And when I heard him talking, I was sitting over there like, yeah, that's my boy.
We don't need new systems, but we need new ways in the system. The system has ways that are not set up for us of color. Police, badge or not, we all, at the end of the day, are human beings, no matter the color, no matter the race, and no matter how we talk or walk, we still together, and we got to come together. Just that we took a slight turn, and hope we could pray. I pray that we get back to down that way.
I pray that my kids will be set to go to college. I pray that they will be able to grow something. I will pray that they get to see 16, 18, 21. I pray that they get to live in the biggest house that they ever want to and fulfill any dreams that they want to.
It may not be surprising to you that Davion said he hopes to become an attorney and continue working on improving the status quo. Colleen?
Governor Gavin Newsom today met with the community and business leaders in South LA. He said now is the time for action.
Don't say something, do something, and prove to me that you can rebuild trust. And trust is about continuity, it's about consistency, it's about doing the right thing over and over and over and over again. And we have to re-earn trust. And that's foundational. We've lost trust with diverse communities, but notably the black community in this country, in this nation.
Governor went door to door in South LA, helping out those who were impacted by the protests, and as you can see, helping to clean up just a little bit as well.
A few hours ago, former President Barack Obama held a virtual town hall to address the unrest over police brutality and had a message not only for the protesters who were calling for change, but the message was also for elected officials who are responsible for making the changes. NBC4's Patrick Healy is live now with more of the impact of that town hall. Patrick?
Indeed, Chuck and Colleen, this very significant hearing and seeing the immediate past president who has been keeping a low profile. He did not talk about things on the federal level. He never mentioned the Trump administration. His focus on change at the local and state level, that is where he says the needed change can and should occur. And he also noted that the conditions vary widely depending on the area.
Let me begin by acknowledging that although all of us have been feeling pain, uncertainty, disruption, some folks have been feeling it more than others.
Immediate past President Barack Obama convening an online town hall with the theme Reimagining Policing in the wake of continued police violence. Not simply a response to the killing of George Floyd at the hands of Minneapolis police, nor simply commentary on the protests that have flooded the nation, but an attempt to steer and energize protests to effect change in government, mainly local and state.
This is not a either or. This is a both and. To bring about real change, we both have to highlight a problem and make people in power uncomfortable, but we also have to translate that into practical solutions and laws.
He noted changes recommended in the wake of outrage to the Ferguson, Missouri death of Michael Brown 6 years ago.
Let's go ahead and start implementing those. So we need mayors, county executives, others who are in positions of power to say this is a priority.
Some fellow town hall speakers went further. Minneapolis City Councilman Philippe Cunningham favors massive transformation to emphasize social programs.
And we have to start thinking about what does it look like to have a future without police? What would it look like for us to not need police, and then work backwards from there?
We pray for our family tree to make its way back home to this soil.
This heartfelt spoken word performance by a high school graduate set the tone for a town hall that, to a great extent, aimed to energize the new generation of activists.
You've communicated a sense of urgency that is as powerful and as transformative as anything that I've seen.
And the past president's ask of mayors is to take the pledge to reform the use of force rules in their own jurisdictions. And again, this is significant because the rules vary widely depending on where you are. The carotid artery restraint, which basically brings the subject into compliance by cutting off the oxygen to the brain, Los Angeles deemed that lethal force decades ago after a series of deaths. It is no longer used in Los Angeles, but that still is legal use of force by law enforcement in certain conditions in Minneapolis. So that is why the local areas, what the rules vary, why that was the president's focus. If I may, let me touch on one more updated subject. LA County Public Health updating the situation with coronavirus in Los Angeles, putting out a statement against supporting the right of demonstrators to go out in public, but at the same time urging those demonstrators who have been in close proximity to others not wearing protective face covering for more than 15 minutes. Those individuals, and there must be tens of thousands of them, are being asked to self-quarantine for 14 days. That they asked from LA County Public Health. For now, reporting live, Patrick Healy, NBC4 News. Back to you.
All right, thank you very much, Patrick. Protests continue in the nation's capital as we get some new details now on President Trump's photo op at the church just across the street from the White House. Sources now telling NBC News the president did it to counteract reports that he was moving into a bunker, that bunker under the White House about 5 floors down during the protest outside Friday night. Police and the National Guard had to forcibly clear protesters out of his path. That led to outrage among many religious leaders. And today, the Secretary of Defense distanced himself from and his troops from that movement.
I did know that we were going to the church. I was not aware of a photo op was happening.
Defense Secretary Mark Esper also says he does not support sending military troops into cities to stop protests.
During the pandemic, we have seen all sorts of drive-through graduations, but safe to say, nothing quite like this. Coming up next right here, the 98-year-old woman who just received her diploma.
And we're keeping an eye on protests that are happening all across Los Angeles. As you can see here, about 3,000, maybe 4,000 people out by the Hall of Justice. We'll be right back.
Burris, I remember interviewing him during the OJ stuff a little bit. He was good.
It's graduation day at Monrovia High School, home of the Wildcats.
He's right. You know, getting one of them, maybe two, is going to be okay, but you're not going to get all four, I don't think. You know, I took all this off, but I don't know if the batteries got replaced. Didn't even look. Probably not, now that I think of it. So we were on the air for 3 hours, but hopefully I just got a half hour left, right? Should be fine.
Yeah, as we wait on the mayor and show you a live picture from large protests in downtown LA.
Oh, then we better get there quickly. Oh, I got a bunch of stuff. New at 5, a very special guest at a very special high school graduation. Vivian Fisher is 98 years old, or young, depending on how you look at it, and despite the pandemic, her dream of finally getting her diploma just came true. NBC4's Kathy Vara has more from Monrovia.
It's graduation day at Monrovia High School, home of the Wildcats. Even with a drive-by celebration, there's a feeling of accomplishment on a day made even more special by this.
Miss Vivian Fisher.
At 98 years old,
Vivian Marguerite Fisher.
Vivian Fisher has something she wanted all her life, a diploma from Monrovia High School.
Well, I was born in Oxnard, and they brought me here when I was a baby.
Vivian wasn't able to graduate with her class back in 1938.
When she was a young person, she was a young girl, teenager, she didn't get the opportunity to finish school because she went to work.
Sacrificing for her family.
Julian Fisher, our grandfather, was the first American of African descent to graduate from Monrovia High School. And that would have been about 1917. That's what they say.
But today, it was Vivian's turn to celebrate.
Wonderful.
Likely the oldest high school graduate in the country this year, she has a message.
Stay in school.
And with Vivian's great-great-nephew also graduating from the same school today, what will she do to celebrate?
I don't know. Something to drink.
She'll have a margarita. Yes, she just loves the margarita.
Congratulations, Vivian. Well deserved. In Monrovia, Kathy Vara, NBC4 News.
Vivian and family look very, very happy out there today. Now we're waiting to hear from Mayor Garcetti any minute now as protesters gather outside of City Hall. Conan Nolan once again live at our News Operations Center with more on what we can expect to hear from the mayor tonight. Conan?
Well, Colleen, we're not exactly sure what he will say, but we expect him to amplify some of what he said yesterday with regard to redirecting perhaps city resources to those priorities that have been articulated in the street protests outside City Hall. This one outside the Hall of Justice, currently taking place in the Civic Center. He may also, there's been some confusion with regard to the curfew, the city and county. We expect him to say something to that effect about when that will take root and whether or not we can expect another one tomorrow. We may actually find out if there's any kind of idea as to how long the National Guard will be on the streets of Los Angeles. A lot on his plate. We'll be hearing from him momentarily. Back to you.
And right now at 6, officers in custody. All 4 fired Minneapolis police officers involved in the death of George Floyd now face criminal charges. And LA residents will be under curfew again tonight as protesters continue to gather. As Conan just mentioned, we are waiting on LA Mayor Eric Garcetti to give us an update on the George Floyd protest. That's at any moment now. We will bring it to you live. Good evening again. I'm Carolyn Johnston.
And I'm Chuck Henry. Several developments today in the George Floyd death investigation as once again we show you that picture on your screen now. Live picture, this very large protest, maybe 3, perhaps even more than that, 1,000 people around the Hall of Justice. We want to update you now on the very latest. 4 Minneapolis police officers are now charged in the death of George Floyd. The officer who placed his knee on Floyd's neck for over 8 minutes now faces the elevated charge of second-degree murder. And for the first time, Minneapolis prosecutors have charged the other 3 officers who were there with him with aiding and abetting and manslaughter. Tonight, the protest continues. One of the largest is the one you see on your screen right now at City Hall. And the curfew begins at 9 p.m. for the entire county of Los Angeles. The sheriff of Los Angeles County says he will begin to enforce that curfew at 10 p.m. Carol?
And those protests, not just in and around Los Angeles. News Chopper 4 Alpha overhead as hundreds of protesters took to the streets in front of the Anaheim Police Department. This is along Anaheim Boulevard between Broadway and Lincoln. The area has been closed to traffic most of the day, and it will remain closed until further notice. Also in Orange County, hundreds gathered for protests in Newport Beach today in response to police brutality and the death of George Floyd. And this afternoon, people gathered along MacArthur Boulevard and East Coast Highway. There was also a gathering at the pier.
Also, protests in Laverne caused delays for some drivers along Foothill Boulevard to South C Street. This protest began around noon today at the City Hall there. Organizers asked everybody to come with a mask and bring a sign and be peaceful.
NBC4's Beverly White is in downtown LA now, where a large crowd has been gathering and that crowd building throughout the course of this day. Beverly.
Hi, Carolyn. They're not just gathering, they are on the move, leaving City Hall as we speak by the hundreds, maybe even thousands. We believe their next destination is Pershing Square, as we witnessed last Wednesday when the George Floyd protests first began. They scattered throughout downtown that Wednesday evening, and wound up on the 101 freeway. In this case, we're not sure what their ultimate destination is. They want to get the word out, chanting Black Lives Matter, hands up, don't shoot, but the chants speak to the fact that they want their voices heard. They're here in big numbers for that very reason, and we're here to share their story with you. Reporting live in downtown LA, I'm Beverly White. Back to you in the studio.
The 4 Minneapolis police officers now charged in the death of George Floyd. The officer who placed his knee on Floyd's neck for over 8 minutes now faces, as we said, that elevated charge now of second-degree murder. And to repeat ourselves, in case you didn't hear it, the other officers who were there on the scene have now been charged with aiding and abetting as well as manslaughter. Well, we're taking a look once again at the protesters who have broken up, and they're heading now, as Beverly White reported, out into the Pershing Square area. The curfew begins for these folks and everybody in the county of Los Angeles at 9 p.m. tonight. The sheriff, Alex Villanueva, says he'll start enforcing that curfew at 10 o'clock. There was a lot of confusion, Carolyn, earlier today about what time this curfew was going to start, and officially it starts at 9 for most everybody.
Well, it's for 9 for those living in the city of Los Angeles, 10 p.m. for LA County, and hence the confusion. We want to check in with Gil Levis. He's live overhead now in the downtown LA area, where, as Beverly mentioned, these protesters are on the move. Gil.
Carolyn and Chuck, we were seeing the group moving south down on Spring Street. You're looking at 5th Street here now. About half the group that we saw over City Hall and the Hall of Justice have moved south down here. The rest have remained on scene. But what we're hearing right now from the LAPD is that this group has turned westbound on 8th Street, and they're concerned about that because even though it's still a ways away from the freeway, they're worried about the 110 freeway and access for this group onto the 110 freeway. So that has the LAPD on alert. Once this crowd turns to the west there on 8th Street, that's just not too far. It's a distance, but still not too far from the freeway for it to be a concern for the LAPD and the CHP. Now, the CHP was at scene at the 101 freeway just north of downtown LA, but now they're deploying some units here in the event that this crowd is able to get to the 110 freeway off of 8th Street. So that's the very latest in News Chopper 4 Bravo. I'll send it back to you in the studio.
All right, Gil, thank you for that. And more now on the situation in Minneapolis and those officers involved in the death of George Floyd. Prosecutors announced criminal charges against all of them today.
I filed an amended complaint that charges former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin with murder in the second degree for the death of George Floyd. Hennepin County Attorney Michael Freeman and I filed a complaint that charges police officer King, Lane, and Tao with aiding and abetting murder in the second degree, a felony offense.
And no man or woman should be without their fathers. Because it's so emotional that we want justice for what's going on right now.
That was George Floyd's son speaking today at the Minneapolis site where his father lost his life, and he took a knee there at that same spot
where his father died.
This afternoon, former President Barack Obama held a virtual town hall, this to discuss how to improve policing across the country and to combat racial bias in the justice system.
It's very important for us to take the momentum that has been created as a society, as a country, and say, let's use this to finally have an impact.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Proud of you guys.
Mr. Obama spoke directly to the people, especially young people who are taking part in these protests all across the country, saying that he is actually encouraged by their efforts to see change made. He also called on the mayors of all cities to review their policies on police reforms and implement strategies to improve those policies. Black leaders say, and they have been saying for some time, that it's simply not enough to just say that you're not a racist. You have to be an anti-racist to fight racism. As NBC4's Ted Chen now reports, it's about attitude and action.
Black leaders say it's an encouraging sign to see so many people involved in these protests. It shows that some people are finally paying attention to things they've been saying for a long time.
They're now being looked at seriously, and that gives a lot of us hope.
KJLH radio host Dominique DePrima and UCLA professor Terrence Keel say it was never enough for anyone to simply say, I'm not a racist.
Oh, I know lots of black people. My brother is married to a black woman.
It shuts down thinking, and it shuts down curiosity.
To be an anti-racist means thinking about the death of George Floyd in a deeper way and taking in how he called out for his mother in his final moments.
It's about humanizing Black life in these moments where so easily this doesn't happen.
And then Keel says it's about connecting the dots. He says when Floyd told police he couldn't breathe, we should remember Eric Garner, who died after being in a chokehold by a New York City police officer. We should see the killing of jogger Ahmaud Arbery and the 911 call by a woman against birdwatcher Christian Cooper, and not just say these things are wrong. Keel and Prima say by doing nothing about it, we are supporting a status quo that is inherently unfair to people of color.
Being an anti-racist means challenging racism wherever it is, even in yourself. Now, it doesn't mean you have to run out and be in a Black Lives Matter protest if that's not what you do. But it does mean you have to consciously take it on.
These leaders say that means asking tough questions about our education, our economy, our politics, our government, and our own hearts, and seeing how they combine to create an unjust society where Black lives matter less, and then demanding change because in George Floyd, we see ourselves. In the Crenshaw District, Ted Chen, NBC4 News.
A group of moms in Sherman Oaks organized their own protest so their children would have a safe place to have their voices heard. 11-year-old Kayla has been watching the protests with her family, but looters taking advantage of the peaceful demonstrations have made it difficult for her or really any children to safely participate in these large events.
I want to help, but I don't want to go out in there because it seems like a lot of craziness is happening.
And her mom says this was a good alternative and a great learning experience. She tells us the children didn't want this demonstration to stop. And we have NBC4's Conan Nolan, who is joining our team coverage now from our News Operations Center. We are awaiting Mayor Garcetti to join us at any moment now with an update, Conan. And one of the issues, understand the mayor has just taken the podium, Conan. We'll get back to you shortly. Let's listen in.
Community, academic, youth organizations that I'm going to talk about in just a minute. But I'm pleased to be joined here also by citizen volunteers who serve as commissioners on our city's police commission. President Eileen Decker, who will be here momentarily, our Vice President Shane Murphy-Goldsmith, and Commissioner Dale Bonner. Thank you, each one of you, for joining us here tonight to talk about this urgent moment for our city, for our country, and for our world. Let me start by saying that I'm glad to see the news of today out of Minneapolis, that all 4 police officers who were involved in the killing of George Floyd have been charged. This is the beginning of justice. We've seen all with our eyes the horrific actions that not just one officer took, but 4 officers took in a modern-day lynching to take the life away of an unarmed black man in America. This is an inflection point for our city and for our country. A moment when we will either rise and take this as the opportunity for hope and for progress, or yet another dark chapter that might have a momentary flash and go away. We can't afford that second possibility. And so I, as your mayor, and I know each one of you listening tonight, are committed to making sure this moment isn't just a moment. It is a movement to change who we are in America when it comes to Black America and our criminal justice system. We need to make a firm commitment to change, not just with words, but with actions. And last night I said I would come before you and do just that. It's a work in progress, and each night demands more. But tonight I look forward to sharing with you the commitments I am making, that our city council is making, that our police commission is making, to everybody on the streets right now saying when, how, what. The when is now. The how is together. And the what is racial equality, not just in our criminal justice system, but throughout our country, here in the United States of America. We need to make sure that Black Americans see an end to the days of murder in broad daylight and of traffic stops simply because of the color of their skin. If you have seen the massive, peaceful demonstrations in our city today, or if you were in one of them, then you know that it is time to move our rhetoric towards actions to end racism in our society, to never forget also our city's own well-documented contributions to those ill-fated chapters. The struggle that we've had and those who've come before us to fight for more equality in their generation, to not dismiss that progress, but to see it and ask for our generation to step up and do the same. We must move beyond reforms that we put in place in our police department, and unfortunately that haven't been done in too many police departments across America. Whether it's being the first big city police department in America to put body-worn video cameras on our officers, releasing videos to the public that keep everybody accountable and that can tell the truth, hiring the most diverse and representative police department of any major city in the United States, and mandating, when nobody else was doing this, implicit bias training that gets to the heart of prejudice in each one of us, whether we wear a badge or not, because prejudice can never be a part of police work. The way we need to institute de-escalation training, not just once, but ongoing. And as we've done here, reward it just as we do medals of valor for bravery. It takes bravery to save lives too, because not every encounter or confrontation should result in the use of force. We need to keep moving towards a new model of peace officers, of a guardian-based system, of how we keep our communities safe, and invest long before any criminal activity ever comes to prevent it from happening in the first place, by developing long-term relationships between our youth and our police departments, like we do where formerly incarcerated Angelenos today work with officers to invest in young people through programs like Summer Nightlights and our gang reduction and youth development programs, which have grown by 50% thanks to the advocacy that we hear in the streets right now. I'm proud of these changes. We should all embrace that progress, changes that align with the call to action that our previous president put out to America in the face of too many deaths, with a commission we participated in on 21st century policing. Now we hear calls from Washington leadership to go back to 20th or 19th century policing, to get tough, to dominate, to not worry about people's heads, to dehumanize them as you put them into squad cars. This not only does not save lives, it costs lives. But it was my brother's keeper and the work that was in President Obama's Commission on 21st Century Policing that brought activists and mayors and city councils and police oversights together to address the use of force policies. And today, President Obama challenged mayors to sign that pledge, to look even today, no matter what you've done well in the past, to recognize that there are things that are still not right in the present. And I was proud to be one of the first mayors in America to sign that pledge. Thank you, President Obama. I also want to say that I'm so grateful. Departments aren't made up of numbers and statistics, but men and women. And there are men and women of our police department right now who are working 12-hour shifts, leading with their hearts every single day. There needs to be even more of that heart and love and compassion. And to those who are protesting, thank you. I'm listening. I hear those voices, and more importantly, we're working together on the actions that will make sure that those voices and those calls don't land flat, but that result in the changes we all need. This is bigger than just a budget, but I want you to know we will not be increasing our police budget. How can we at this moment? We have heroes who wear a uniform. I wore a uniform for 12 years in the Navy. And whether it's them or members of our National Guard who are here today, I know that they all would much rather be home. That they all want a moment in which the pain of this country goes away. And I know that the vast, overwhelming majority of them are ready to work to do that. To take the classes, to learn the training, to go inward. And as we've seen so many pictures that don't dominate the news, but the hugs given, the knees taken, the relationships opened up, and the dialogues that have happened. Even as we have to hold ourselves accountable for everything on the street, whether we're the everyday public or our police officers. In fact, tonight, I want to announce that we aren't just putting the work of moving forward on the shoulders of activists or of African Americans or police officers. It's on those of us who you have elected to represent you to step up to this moment. I've been working very hard with the City Council, and we've been meeting with community groups and coalitions like the one that I told you I just came from, that represents so many amazing organizations, from the LA Black Workers Center, the Community Coalition, to unions like the Service Employees Union International, to folks who stock the shelves at our grocery stores, and teachers who teach our children every single day, to folks in the immigrant rights community on the east side of the city and the south end of LA, who came together to challenge us in very raw and angry terms, because this is a moment for us all to be angry and sad of whether our city council and I would commit to reinvesting in black communities and communities of color in those places left behind. A lot of people listening who might not know the statistics, many of which I shared last night, might not know that in America, the average white household has $171,000 of average household wealth, while in the black community that's $17,000. May not know that you're more likely, as I mentioned, to be homeless, to be incarcerated, to be sick, to be dying from COVID-19 if you're black in America. That we don't all start from an equal standpoint, and not only do we not start from, then on day one, because of the color of our skin, we don't have the same experience and treatment, whether that's from law enforcement, your own government, your health system, and so many other places. So today, with our city council, with Council President Nuri Martinez, with council members Herb Wesson, Marquise Harris Dawson, and Curran Price, and so many other members of the council, from Mike Bonin to Mitch O'Farrell and others, we have all said we have to do something different. We hear what people are saying. And so I have instructed and committed to, in public to that group, that our city, through our city administrative officer, identify $250 million in cuts so we can invest in jobs, in health, in education, and in healing. And that those dollars need to be focused on our black community here in Los Angeles, as well as communities of color and women and people who have been left behind for too long. And will this involve cuts? Yes, of course, to every department, including the police department, because we all have to be a part of this solution together. We all have to step up and say, what can we sacrifice? We've done that as elected officials, putting that back in the pot ourselves. We've done that as civilian employees, putting that back in the pot ourselves. We've made cuts because of COVID-19. It's time to also make cuts because racial justice is something worth fighting for and something worth sacrificing for. And I want you to know that where we are spending, we will also be making changes and investments that can lead to structural reform, not just one-off payments for this moment, but a rethinking of how we can build on the successes of the past, but go much further than the present. One of our most important protections for our residents is that we have civilian oversight of our police department. 5 Angelenos, appointed by me, confirmed by our city council, all of them unpaid volunteers, and trust me, they all have separate full-time jobs, and this is like having a second job, often away from family, in the face of great anger, difficult issues. They serve all of us. They look at the policies that guide our police department. They oversee its operations, and they review all officer-involved shootings. And every Tuesday, as we saw yesterday, the commission and the police chief hold a meeting, a public meeting, where residents are given the opportunity to speak directly to the entire leadership of the department. I appointed these commissioners because I know who they are as human beings. They have sharp minds, but more importantly, they have hearts for justice. And they hold a common commitment to building a better, more just, and safer city. So tonight I can also announce important changes coming from the commission that this moment demands, calls for, changes that build on our historic reforms at other painful moments, changes that address what we are hearing from you. We will put a moratorium on putting people in the Cal Gang database, require officers to intervene when they see inappropriate use of force, to always report misconduct, and we will invest in young people through community services and youth development that will change lives so that we can keep people away from any criminal justice system. We will increase departmental training, as we've already started, but need to do more, in implicit bias and increase discipline against inappropriate action. These things will strengthen accountability. As many people have said, nobody hates a bad cop more than a good cop. We have to make sure that there is no culture of silence, that there is no culture of acquiescence, that there is no culture of being a bystander. There is only right and wrong on our streets and the streets across America. It's just a start. And I know in a single night, it's never enough. We can't walk to the promised land in a single day, nor a single week, but we better get ready. And I know not everyone is going to be happy with each step. There is criticism from all sides when we change any of the status quo. But my commitment is to always push forward. This is a moment we have to look back in 20 years from now and say we did the right thing. As police officers, as public officials, and as the public, that we rose to this occasion to say we could do this together, better, different, stronger. And why? Because we believe that all lives are sacred. As we've shown during our COVID-19 fight, we need to show that in an even tougher moment demanding more of each one of us, starting with me. So to talk about the changes from the commission, I'd like to ask the commission president, Eileen Decker, to say some words, and then I'll come back, give some news about tonight's curfews and moving forward, what we can do to help our city. President Decker.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The demonstrations of the last few days have been transformative for the people of Los Angeles, for California, and our nation. The demands for law enforcement reform are being heard. Angelenos have been crying for a path forward that doesn't repeat the mistakes of the past, and the Board of Los Angeles Police Commissioners is listening. Today, this body, the Police Commission, is charged with the oversight of the Los Angeles Police Department and is establishing an aggressive reform agenda which continues the evolution to our commitment to the 21st century policing principles that the mayor just addressed. In the past, this department has made historic changes, historic strides in our commitment and our continuing journey to prove our commitment to community engagement, meaningful partnerships, and constitutional policing. But we must do more. So tonight I will be announcing some of our commitments and steps forward. These are just the first steps in what is a continuing journey for greater accountability, increased transparency, and the strengthening of our public trust. So these reforms include a review and revision of the police department budget. The Commission is committed to work with the City Administration Officer, the Chief Legislative Analyst, and the Mayor's Office to identify $100 to $150 million of cuts from the Los Angeles Police Department's budget. We will work to further enhance community neighborhood policing, specifically the commitment to expand the Community Safety Partnership sites and program. We will also work with the community and the department to reflect on and accurately portray the history of the police department that will be part of the training for Academy cadets, in-service training, and will be available for the public as well. We will work for modifications of enforcement strategies, specifically an immediate moratorium on new entries into the Cal Gang database until such time as the Commission has completed its review of the entire gang entry removal system. Further, an expansion of the juvenile diversion program to include all 21 geographic areas and divisions to lessen the incarceration of juveniles. Further, we will support meaningful, reformative legislation that other entities are responsible for. Specifically, we will advocate for a change to the city charter regarding the discipline of officers. We will publish new department policy that requires officers to intervene when other officers use excessive force and requires officers to report misconduct immediately. We will support the establishment of an independent prosecutor outside the district attorney's office for the prosecution of police officers who engage in misconduct. We will support legislation and work to improve juvenile diversion programs to ensure that as few juveniles as possible see the criminal justice system. We will work towards the enhancement of police training, specifically expand the mental health intervention training program to train a minimum of 900 additional officers this year and expand it further in the future. We will complete all de-escalation training and crowd control training for the entire department by the end of this year. We will deliver procedural justice training to everyone in the department who has not yet received it. We will further deliver implicit bias update courses to everyone in the department by the end of this year. We will broaden the risk management assessment issues, and this is very important to our community. We will review the process for the uses of force to determine if our early warning system can be used better to identify problematic officer behavior as soon as possible and intervene to be as effective as possible. We will determine additional ways to enhance greater oversight of officers who have exhibited a pattern of high-risk behavior. Further, we will expand the transparency and accountability efforts of the Commission. We are going to ensure that the materials that are available are made more transparent to the public and allow for ease of access to all of those materials when the public is seeking information on uses of force, complaints, crime statistics, department policies, and procedures. And we will continue the development of the Racial and Identifying Profiling Act data analysis to ensure that we are using that information as fully and completely as possible. And this is all in addition to the measures I addressed yesterday at the Police Commission meeting. I want to thank my fellow commissioners who have been working diligently on these projects and who want to accelerate all of them immediately to ensure that the public knows we are listening we hear you, and we will move forward with our community, our Los Angeles, to ensure that we start the healing process for everyone and ensure the fundamental principles of fairness, equity, and dignity are available to every Angelino, not just some. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Commission President Decker. That's a lot to take in, I know, for folks that are there, listening and watching us. But that's an extraordinary list. It is, we hope, the nation-leading list. Los Angeles has been called in other tough times to step forward and not just to lead for this city, but to lead for this country. And I would encourage my fellow mayors and city council members and local leaders around the country to embrace this list of reforms as well. That these are the foundation for marching forward together and for ensuring that we save lives on the streets of our city and yours as well. We cannot just be anti-violence. We have to be pro-humanity. That's what tonight is about. We must be pro-belonging, so that this is truly a city of belonging where everybody feels in equal measure that they belong to this city. Free community college, raising the minimum wage, expanding our fight against homelessness, banning the box, reducing our prison populations, growing our re-entry programs, expanding job training and placement. We've got to double down on this work now. It is that urgent, and everything on the street is as much about that as anything else. It's vital for Los Angeles to actively attack structural racism and support human rights in every way possible. And in our city government, we can do that in part by building departments that reflect those values. I know I have a lot of announcements tonight, but stay with me because we've got some more. That's why, thanks to the leadership of Councilmember Gil Cedillo, Council President Emeritus Herb Wesson, Council President Nuri Martinez, we've laid the groundwork for the first ever in our city's history Civil and Human Rights Department and a Civil and Human Rights Commission. And now, led by Capri Maddox, this department will be tasked with protecting Angelinos and anyone who works in or visits the city from discrimination that denies equal treatment in private employment, housing, education, or commerce by initiating and investigating complaints of discrimination, as well as enforcing the LA Civil and Human Rights Ordinance. And with the dogged determination of Councilmember Wesson, our partners Community Coalition, and Councilmembers Harris, Dawson, and O'Farrell, we've also established an Office of Racial Equity within this department, a team that will conduct research, outreach, and policy development to help us apply an equity lens to everything that we do, where we spend our dollars, how our programs impact communities of color, and everything we do moving forward. And tonight I can announce that the first meeting of the Civil and Human Rights Commission will be late next week, and we will set up the department and have its Office of Racial Equity up and running by July 1st. That's months ahead of schedule and less than a month from now. We will push every day to make our communities free of discrimination that denies basic human dignity and violates our rights as Americans. Every step we take, every time we respond to the protests that we hear calling for change, when we enact smart police reforms, when we invest in human rights and we attack structural racism amongst us, all of it is meant to make sure all of us are safer and that all of us have a better Los Angeles. While we keep fighting to enact short and long-term change, we also need to make sure that we protect public safety now. So tonight, there remains in place a curfew. In the city of Los Angeles, people are required to stay indoors starting at 9 p.m., and the order will be enforced from 10. And that will last until 5 a.m. tomorrow morning. This starts later than previous nights, which is a reflection not only of the peace that we've had on our streets, but the good policing that's been going on.
There has just been an earthquake in the area. We are working right now to get more information on that. We will bring that to you just as soon as we have it. We'll take you back now to the news conference with the mayor.
This starts later than other nights, and tomorrow, barring a bad night from tonight, the curfew will be lifted in the city of Los Angeles. When the curfew does take effect tonight, though, please stay inside and stay safe and obey the law. And if you're out past 9 p.m., you need to go home. Please, go home. The power of the day we see. Watch it on TV. Embrace it, understand it, and let's earn moving forward those steps that we all deserve to see enacted. And I'm still again urging everybody who's been out protesting to take a free COVID-19 test. Remember that this can incubate, so you might want to do one in a week, and a second week from that it could be up to 14 days. You may be asymptomatic and not even know you're sick. You may be taking every precaution that you can, wearing a face covering.
We know it's a 5.1 earthquake in Cyril's Valley, which is the Ridgecrest area. Again, we're working to get more information for you on that earthquake, widely felt throughout our region.
I was just informed too that we just had a large earthquake, as if things couldn't get worse, in San Bernardino, a 5.7 on the Richter scale earthquake. And of course, our hearts and our activities will go to support everybody in San Bernardino. And we're still assessing to see what that sort of damage is. But please, everybody, be safe, especially those, our brothers and sisters in San Bernardino who are watching. If you've been out with a larger crowd in the protests recently, where it's hard to distance, and you don't want to take the risk, please get yourself a COVID-19 test. You can sign up for them at coronavirus.lacity.org/testing. And don't worry, you don't just get to do it once. Do it now, do it a week from now, maybe 2 weeks from now. And our largest testing center at Dodger Stadium remains open tomorrow, able to handle 6,000 tests, the largest in the country, as well as the Crenshaw Christian Center, which has been our largest one, and walk-up centers at Kedron Community Health Center in South LA, and also Carbon Health in Echo Park. Last night, as I concluded, I talked about the two paths that we have in front of us. We can choose hopelessness or hope. As a city and as a nation, that translates into real and concrete decisions. Are we going to settle for more division across race and class, unequal opportunity in our country? Or will we take this moment, this chance, this common ground that we all feel in our hearts, seeing George Floyd's life as he called for his mama disappear? Will we take this moment and make sure that it results in the actions we need to see to build the nation that we all hold in our hearts? Will we bend the arc of history just a little bit more? We bent the curve when it was COVID-19. It's time for us to bend the arc when it comes to racial justice. And I ask all of you, in front of and behind the badge, all of us out there in protests or watching on TV, all of us that might be scared and confused to understand that there's fear that people have lived with every day of their lives since they were born, and that we have a role in reducing that fear and in saving lives. And if we do that, we will look back at this moment, as painful as it feels, and we will say it was one of the brightest moments in our city's and our nation's history. Thank you, Los Angeles. And with that, I'm happy to answer questions.
Good evening, Mayor Garcetti. Good evening, everyone. This is Robert Kadasik from NBC4. We have a number of questions for you, Mayor, from my colleagues, but first, we all just felt the room rumble. I'm wondering, while you were speaking, did you feel that earthquake as well?
I didn't. I think I was so much into I saw it because it was written by a colleague. I did not feel that, but...
All right, Mayor Garcetti, let's begin by asking how you and the City Council can tell the LAPD that you are cutting into their budget when right now, currently, every single LAPD officer has been called to duty just trying to help manage the protests and keep the public safe.
It's a fair question, and I'll answer it straightforwardly. To the men and women of our Los Angeles Police Department, we ask so much of you, and never more than in these days. All of us, every single one of us, are making a sacrifice. This is not on your shoulders alone. COVID-19 has given us the worst economy in our lives, a pandemic and a health crisis. And now on our streets, we need to find resources to address what you often have to deal with on the streets, the failure of our country to address racial justice. And I know that officers, because I've talked to so many over the 19 years I've served this city, are with me in that walk. That they know, I have seen the programs, they put many more hours than I have, tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of hours mentoring young people so that they don't have to see them on the streets in an encounter. Believing that if they can give somebody a lesson rather than giving them a citation, that they can set their life in a different direction. My grandfather was a Mexican kid growing up here in Los Angeles who used to tell me the story of how one of the turning points in his life is when a police officer arrested him in Boyle Heights and gave him a second chance. That police officer was my predecessor in this office, Tom Bradley. He believed enough in a young boy to set him down a path that allowed me to stand here in front of this platform today. And so our police officers, I want you to know, we are sharing this sacrifice with you. We've already stepped up forward and we appreciate the long hours you have on the line, the sacrifices you have made away from your family, the restraint and the heroism that you are showing. Yes, of course, we want to improve this department, continue to reform a department, and everybody better be held accountable no matter who they are as a city employee. But this is necessary if this moment will be a moment of progress or just of pain.
This next question is from Claudia Pesquita from KNX 1070. Even as you talked last night, Mayor, about hearing what people in the streets are saying, officers outside City Hall were threatening to arrest protesters for violating curfew. Supervisor Janice Hahn says curfews are no longer needed, and it, quote, seems like they are being used to arrest peaceful protesters. So given how things went last night, and understanding what you just said about tomorrow night, why does LA still need a curfew again this evening?
Look, there are still more acts of unsafety not coming from protesters, to be very clear, than we've seen because people exploit these moments. They exploit them, as we've seen small business owners from Van Nuys downtown, immigrant-owned, women-owned, Latino and African-American-owned businesses, folks who put everything they have in there, and it's my responsibility to make sure that they are safe. We've seen caches of bricks, a gun hidden. These are still times in which we need to make sure that we're not walking away from our responsibilities to keep protesters safe and our community safe. That said, before I think any other big city that I've heard of, I know Portland just wound theirs down, I was proud to say that, barring a bad night tonight, it will stop tomorrow. Let's make this a night of peace, and I agree. Let's get back to making sure that we can see the beautiful protests and the calls for change, and that we can help our police officers root out any separate criminal activity without having to rely on a curfew.
Claudia has a follow-up here. Given reports of protesters being crowded onto buses, do you have any concerns about how the LAPD is handling the people that they are now taking into custody?
I will always listen to what people are saying we do right and we do wrong as a city, as a department, and I think we can always improve. But no, for a lot of folks, this is the first time maybe that they've been arrested. I've been arrested in acts of civil disobedience as well. I do share concerns about out on the street and or anybody who gets arrested, given a public health crisis, that we have to make sure we do everything we can to slow the spread of COVID-19.
We're going to leave. Caroline,
go ahead, Chuck.
Well, I'm just going to say we're going to leave the mayor's press conference right now. I'll give you the latest on this earthquake that we have. It's been upgraded to a 5.5, about 14 miles from Ridgecrest, that same area that was hit by a fairly strong earthquake in the 6 range. Yeah. It actually was preceded by 2 other earthquakes in the same general area in Barstow and Tonopah of 3.6 and 3.9. Carolyn?
Well, let's check in with Anthony Yanez. Meteorologist Anthony Yanez is tracking the very latest with this earthquake and has some more information for us. Anthony.
Let me show you what I'm seeing here on our earthquakes map here. You could see this red dot is in the familiar place of where we had the Ridgecrest earthquake on July 4th. Of last year, and so 11 months later we're seeing another fairly strong earthquake, and you can see there's the two different, you were talking, Chuck was just talking about the foreshock of the 2.6, and then this one coming in at magnitude 5.5. It is right there, the Searles Valley and in Ridgecrest, and so and it was felt by a lot of us. It was shallow, and that's why it was felt.
Anthony, we're going to go to Dr. Lucy Jones right now, who's on the phone. Good evening, Lucy.
Good evening. Hi.
Okay, so what can you tell us about this? Happens in the same general area as the one we had just 11 months ago.
It is an aftershock to the Ridgecrest earthquake of
Okay.
last year. So big earthquake, that was of course a 7.1. Earthquake that big happens on a pretty long fault. It was, and this earthquake is at the very southern end of that fault. But I remember 11 months ago going large late aftershock on with time, but the ratio of the number of small to large stays the same. And if you have a lot of, we've had a lot of earthquakes in the last 11 months. I was just about to try and count them and haven't had a chance to do that search yet. Eventually you got to have another a bigger one to keep that ratio constant. So this isn't a surprise to anyone.
And Lucy, this was certainly widely felt. I mean, we're getting calls into our newsroom from really all over the region.
Yeah, in fact, one of my colleagues called me before anything else. Was that an earthquake? And I'm going, what? And I hadn't even gotten the tape yet. So yeah, people definitely felt it here in the Pasadena, Burbank area. It is at the very southern end of that aftershock zone, so it's the closest one to us. I will say I was sitting quietly listening to the mayor and didn't feel a thing. So you had to be pretty lucky to feel it.
And the depth of the depth was about 6 miles. It was powerful enough to cause some slight damage?
It might be, except that there's not very much very near it. So I would think that the only place there might have been some damage probably would be in Ridgecrest itself, maybe Trona. But even, because it's at the southern end, it's farther away than the earlier earthquakes were.
Farther away from where there are more populated areas.
Right, from Ridgecrest or Trona. It's very near the Garlock Fault. I went out there to see the fault after the earthquake last summer, and it's a lot of very empty territory.
Dr. Lucy Jones, we appreciate your insight. Thank you for joining us. Again, this 5.5 earthquake felt really throughout the area. It was felt here in our newsroom in Universal City. Folks in Glendale have been calling in as well.
I wonder if the folks out in that picture there that are gathered around the Hall of Justice downtown also felt it. They must have. I mean, they're outside. Here's Conan Nolan. Conan, the big takeaway out of the mayor's press conference today were these budget cuts. He's talking about $250 million from the city, and another, I guess, coming out of that $250, $150 million out of the police department. It's going to be very expensive. How's he going to pay for it? What services are going to be scaled back considerably to accommodate that?
Well, it's very interesting. It looks like it was a victory for Black Lives Matter, who've been advocating for a cut to the police budget, although they wanted a much larger one than $150 million, so we're not sure if they're going to be placated by this. I noticed that the police chief, Michael Moore, was not at the news conference. We might surmise from that he was opposed to this cut and may have lobbied very much against it. This is just as prior to the COVID-19 crisis, it looked like the LAPD was going to get a budget increase. Their budget is about $1.8 billion, so $150 million might not seem all that much in the whole scheme of things, but it is a substantial cut to the police department. And the mayor said in answer to a question that it's in response to the COVID-19 crisis, the downturn in the economy, the lack of tax revenue coming into the city. But I have to say, there was a much different message that was sent by Nuri Martinez, councilwoman from the San Fernando Valley, who's the president of the LA City Council. She introduced the budget cut as a motion today, and in her statement, I can just paraphrase, she said something to the effect of, in order to address racism and the insidious nature of racism in communities, including that which exists in our own police department, we have to reestablish our priorities when it comes to the budget. That was not taken very well by the Los Angeles Police Protective League, who sent out a tweet, and I can read it to you, directly to not what the mayor just said, but rather to what Councilwoman Martinez, to declare that the work police officers perform that we've been directed to do is designed to harm people of color, while Ms. Martinez repeatedly sends us into harm's way, is divisive, disrespectful, and certainly is no profile encouraged, unquote. That from the Police Protective League. And they will also make one other point. The mayor discusses and brings into the conversation a number of studies and percentages relating to the position that some of these communities have relations to other neighborhoods in the city. The Police Protective League had pointed out, though, that if you're an African-American teenager in the United States, you're 8 to 9 times more likely to die in a homicide, which goes to the point that police have to be in these neighborhoods to help protect them, and by taking money away from the department does not engender much protection or safety in some of the neighborhoods that need it most. So I think you're going to see quite a bit of pushback from this, but it appears the mayor has the votes on the council, and he certainly has the momentum based on the crowds we're seeing outside City Hall and the Hall of Justice in order to cut the police budget, while plenty of people will say at a time like this, with a pandemic still raging around the state and the city, with thousands of people protesting and coming off of days where you saw some looting and violence, this is probably not the time to cut your law enforcement department. That's the debate we're going to be seeing over the next several days and weeks.
Yeah, no doubt, Conan. And we also heard about big changes coming to the police commission. Let me just go through a few of them here. This immediate moratorium to putting people in the CalGang database. This is something that a lot of activists have fought long and hard for, that officers must report misconduct and intervene when they see an inappropriate use of force. They're upping the training for these officers. They want to get mental health training in place. They're going to do additional training on de-escalation, implicit bias training. So they rattled off a bunch of things, an expansion of the juvenile diversion program. Your thoughts on this?
Right, and all of that takes money, which means it could divert the spending already allocated or soon to be allocated for the police department, which some may see as another cut, because elements of the budget that go to the rank and file and to the policing operations already in place are not going to be diverted to new programs and priorities. There's no question about it, though, that the mayor believed he needed to act. The council believed they needed to act. They saw what happened in Minneapolis, and they believed that they wanted to take steps to make sure something like that wouldn't happen here. And this is a reference to something we saw following World War II, for example, in Germany, when the German army was reestablished. It was put in their constitution that people could disobey an order as a means to correct the mismanagement from higher-ups in a military department. That may be something that they're looking at here, that you will not be penalized. There will be no institutional mandate that the command staff on a scene, a lieutenant or a sergeant, can't be countermanded by somebody else in order to make sure that what they saw in Minneapolis doesn't happen here. That also has to be worked out, though, and it'll be very interesting to see what the chief of police has to say about that, as well as his command staff, because they're looking at a lot of changes to the LAPD on the fly.
All right, thank you very much, Conan. I'd be interested to know, and we do have Beverly White, who's live downtown right now, if anybody in that large crowd out there heard anything about these cuts to the LAPD budget and what their reaction may have been. Beverly.
Well, Chuck, they were all out here in the streets, frankly, thousands of people who have been on the move, and that kind of static in front of City Hall, between City Hall, the courthouse, and the LAPD. So no, I seriously doubt they're aware of the issues that were shared just a short time ago by Mayor Garcetti and the LA Police Commission regarding the gang database and the budget cuts and the like. But trust me, when we interviewed some of the protesters a short time ago, they made it plain they have grave concerns, strong concerns with issues in Minnesota where George Floyd was killed, and also right here in Los Angeles with our district attorney. Take a listen.
Yeah, it is progress, but then in the second thought of that, I don't want you to just appease me. When is this trial happening? Are you pushing things back because of this COVID situation? We want things to happen immediately.
To defend our rights to just be black and not have police brutalize us in the street on camera. And for Jackie Lacey to get out of office because she is not doing anything helpful for us.
I am out here today because everything that I love and consume comes from black people. I love black music, I love black food. My black peers, I've had my best memories with these people, and I just don't believe that I'm living in 2020 right now. I am shocked.
Thousands of people remain here, as we indicated, near the LAPD City Hall and the courthouse. They came to protest about the George Floyd killing, and with Black Lives Matter and other progressive groups. No sign of violence, no conflict, no confrontations thus far, but we can assure you the LAPD has a large presence here, as does the National Guard, trying to maintain the peace in these streets. Reporting live in downtown LA, I'm Beverly White. Back to you in the studio.
Thank you for that. We want to get back to meteorologist Anthony Annes, who is tracking the earthquake for us. And Anthony, you've had a little bit of time to gather some more numbers for us.
Yeah, and I really want to get into why it was felt by so many people. So let's just kind of give you a broad overview of what's happening now. We'll go ahead and show you. Here's LA. You head up to Ridgecrest, and it's that same area that we saw 11 months ago, the 6.4th of July earthquake, and then the 7.1 the next day, and this was a 5.5. It was shallow. You can see the difference is shallow and then a moderate quake at 4 miles deep. And shallow quakes are felt more, especially when they're larger in intensity, like this one was at 5.5 on the magnitude scale. And again, it was just on that edge of shallow and moderate. And when you look at comparing earthquake energy, we have 3s all the time here in Southern California. But when you go to 5s, what's happened is there's 1,000 times more energy. And you take somewhat of a shallow or moderate quake like this, it is going to be felt by more people. And 5s are always felt in the area, and there is going to be some damage. Typically, the damage is fairly minor, but again, as Dr. Lucy Jones was talking about, it's a pretty sparse area. There's not a lot around there compared to if this happened in the city of LA, there would be a little bit more damage to see, but most likely there's not going to be a whole lot in this area because as we saw with the 6.4th of July, I called the 6.4th of July, 6.4 4th of July earthquake and the 7.1 the next day, in that area, while a lot of damage was seen, it's a pretty small population. Comparing that to what would happen here in Los Angeles, it'd be a lot more damage. And with a 5.5, there'd be some damage, but again, it would be on the lesser side compared to a 6 or a 7. Back to you.
You mentioned Dr. Jones. She also said it was an aftershock of that larger 7.1 earthquake, and we could even expect more.
Yeah, and this one was an aftershock because just a few minutes before this one, there was a 2.6, right. And then you had the 5.5 really a few moments later.
Yeah, and they've even upgraded those numbers to a 3.6 and a 3.9, Tonopah and Barstow. Oh. In the same general area, yeah. Anthony, yeah.
And Anthony, we talked about the depth. It was about 4 miles deep.
Yeah, 6 kilometers, and so there's the map there. And again, a shallow quake's considered the surface all the way to 3 miles, and this was 4 miles deep, 6 kilometers, and so again, right on the edge there.
All right, thank you very much, Anthony Annes. We are going to be joining the NBC 90 News with Lester Holt at the top of the hour, 7 o'clock. We want to give you, before we go, the latest in the battle against COVID-19. Here's an update now on how the virus is spreading in our area tonight. Los Angeles County now reports more than 58,000 cases. Orange County has more than 6,600. Riverside County, more than 8,300 cases. San Bernardino County reporting 5,600 cases. And Ventura County now has more than 1,100 cases. The death toll in our 5-county region stands at 3,235, and most of those in Los Angeles County. Governor Gavin Newsom was in Southern California today, meeting with business and community leaders in Leimert Park. He walked up and down South Los Angeles with County Supervisor Mark Ridley Thomas. They also walked door to door into businesses, helping out owners that were impacted by the protesting and by cleaning up.
And today, Chuck, hundreds of people in South LA were offered free COVID-19 tests and free meals. The drive-through testing site was set up outside of the YMCA in the Vermont Vista neighborhood. 300 tests were made available to community members here, and the event also served as a grocery giveaway to help families who need assistance during the coronavirus pandemic.
Once again, we want to go back to Conan Nolan in our News Operations Center. More on this budget. I thought your remarks were terribly interesting. You know, it's going to affect local policing, is it not, in the same communities that are hurting right now?
Well, certainly that will be the argument from, I think, the department, the command staff. Again, Michael Moore wasn't at that news conference. It'll certainly be the argument from the Police Protective League. They will say, listen, you have the worst civil unrest and looting and street violence in 28 years, and your first order of business is to cut the police department. That's what they will say. the city will say, as they have, that listen, we do believe you have enough money. We need to cut anyhow because we have lost the amount of revenue that we're getting because of the COVID-19 crisis. That will be the debate we're going to be seeing going forward.
Thank you very much. Conan Nolan. A change in programming tonight. The NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt will air at 7:30, not 7 o'clock. Chicago Med kicks off primetime at 8 o'clock. And join us for the NBC4 News tonight at 11. Coming up next, Access Hollywood. Have a good evening.
Copy, Jack. Thank you. So Sarah, I want to let's look at that building with the huge billboard that's south of the tent. Over here, you know, the one that's always super bright. I actually noticed that one of the advertisements coming up is for Black Lives Matter. So I want to get that one. Right there it is. We're gonna have to wait for the next one. Let's see. And it should be up soon. And if you want to mark the tape, this is a building that's south of downtown. They have a billboard on it that says Black Lives Matter. It's the Reef building just south of the tent. We can go back to the protesters. Joining us online, Emily Adamuino up here with my pilot, Sarah Garabetian, in Top Report Alpha. We're making our way through the buildings in downtown here to head back to City Hall, where we have thousands of people that have gathered to protest against police brutality, and as well as to seek justice in the death of George Floyd, who died in an altercation with authorities in Minneapolis, Minnesota. All 4 officers who were involved in Floyd's death have now been charged. So that is one of the latest things to come out of Minneapolis in regards to that situation. We're just getting back over to City Hall. City Hall is located at Spring and First, which is on the east side of all the big buildings in downtown LA. As Sarah brings the hopper around, you will see a large crowd that has gathered just on Spring Street. So they're essentially north of First Street, south of Temple. I'm pushing in here so we can watch the crowd. This Now this crowd, as big as it looks, is actually not as big as it once was. There was a point when we were out here earlier where the crowd was not only on Spring Street, but they were also spilling out onto Temple, which is that street right there, and it seems like it has decreased a little bit, but you can see that a lot of people have actually already made their way to the park also, that is just to the west of City Hall. You can see a lot of them just sitting down, taking a little break. It has been a long day of protesting for the people out there, and it's been a hot day too. It's been rather warm today, anywhere from the low 90s to about 100. In the San Fernando Valley where we flew out of, it was at least 100. And during the course of all of this protesting, we happened to have had an earthquake. It wasn't directly in Los Angeles. It was actually closer to Ridgecrest. It was an aftershock of a magnitude 7.1 earthquake, I believe, that we had back last year. That was on July 5th. We actually had a foreshock on July 4th of last year, and then we had the big earthquake on July 5th. And then today, essentially 11 months later, we had a big aftershock that was at least 5.1. I think it may have gotten upgraded to 5.5. We still don't know if there were any injuries or any damage as a result of that earthquake, but the area where it did strike is, pardon me, I need to speak to my assignment desk. Hi, Jamie. Perfect, thank you. I was just speaking to Jamie Bankson back at the assignment desk at NBC in Universal City. She was telling me that a lot of people have called the station to let us know what they felt in regards to the magnitude 5.5 earthquake. And we're hearing from people, even out in Ridgecrest, which was basically the epicenter of the earthquake, and they're saying they felt it. It was a really big jolt. And then we're also hearing from people in the San Fernando Valley who say they felt it. Of course, they wouldn't have felt it as strong as some of the people out in Ridgecrest, but we are getting those calls about people who definitely felt the earthquake. We've also heard that some people in the San Gabriel Valley felt it. Now, all of these people that you see here were out here when the earthquake occurred, but from the chopper, I couldn't really see their reaction to see if people down there felt it. If they did, they didn't leave. The crowd really didn't diminish after the quake. It's still holding strong at several thousand. At one point, we were estimating that the crowd was at least 3,000 people, and it still looks like it's pretty substantial. At least 1,000, probably closer to 2,000 that are still out here in the City Hall area of downtown. Again, this is going to be Spring and First, which is also not far from the headquarters of the LAPD. And since I bring that up, what we're going to do is we're actually going to look over at the LAPD headquarters here for just a moment, because the LAPD headquarters have been the site of protesting over the last few days. So we want to focus in here on First Street to see how large the crowd is over at LAPD. And it looks like the crowd is substantial. I would say at least 50 people out here. There are barricades. I'll push in here so that you can see. There are barricades there between the protesters and that line of LAPD officers. But as you can see, everyone's just kind of standing around. It's all very peaceful. The officers are there in a straight line, just kind of keeping tabs on everything, monitoring everything. The protesters, they're out here, a lot of them with signs, a lot of them with their focus directed towards the officers and towards the building itself. So I'm pushing in here. That helicopter that you see there is one of the LAPD helicopters. He's hovering over the crowd. Usually the helicopter's duty will be to just kind of keep tabs on the crowd size and keep the ground units informed about how large the crowd is growing, what direction they're coming from or leaving to. If the crowd starts to make their way over to the freeway, the airship will be the first to notify some of the ground units about the direction that they're heading in. I do see a small number of people starting to make their way towards the freeway, but it could be just because they may have parked in the neighboring area. I do see all of those people, they're walking away. They're walking northbound here on Main Street, coming over the 101 freeway. But since we're here, we're going to take a quick moment. We're going to check it out, see if people are hanging out here on the freeway overpass. And it does look like that is in fact what is taking place. I'll try to use my doubler here so we can focus a little closer on some of the people that are out here with their signs. You see those two young women there. They were just holding their signs up in the direction of the freeway. And you do have other signs that have been left along the fence here for the motoring public to look at as they travel here on the 101 freeway. Again, this is going to be not on the actual freeway lanes themselves. It's going to be on one of the overpasses. It is going to be the Main Street overpass for the 101 freeway. Now, this was an area that was very busy just a week ago because there was a group of protesters that actually made their way onto the 101 freeway, and unfortunately some of them did get hurt while they were down there because there were a few people that actually got onto the top of a CHP squad car, and when the vehicle took off, the people who were on the car came flying off and got injured. So we know that there were people that were actually transported to the hospital due to the injuries that they sustained. Now, I highly doubt that that's going to happen today because just steps away from what we're looking at there, we do have units of the LAPD that are staging in the area and acting as barriers and traffic control to prevent the crowd from moving to the freeway. We don't know that that is their intention or that it will at any point happen tonight, but if it should, I can tell you that there are CHP and LAPD units here in the area blocking what would essentially be the access to the freeway. No on-ramps and off-ramps are shut down that we know of, but the CHP again is in the area, and it would be their duty to shut down those on-ramps and off-ramps if it is necessary, as they are the police department that patrols our highway system here in the state of California. You see additional units from the LAPD coming in, and I can tell that all these units are LAPD, but they're all not necessarily from this division of the LAPD. I actually see that a good number of the ones that we are focusing on here are units from the Newton division of the LAPD, which is actually south of here. The area that we're in right now is the central division of the LAPD. So on a regular day, the vehicles that you would see there, if they were patrolling this area, instead of the number 13 on the back of the squad car, you would just see the number 1. But in this case, because there really aren't any protests or other issues where all of these units are necessary in the Newton division area of the city, they've been able to send some of those units to central LA, to the downtown LA area to assist with traffic control for the most part, and also, if necessary, to assist with arrests in the odd case of looting, for example. We actually haven't heard about any looting today, though, which is some great news. Yesterday there was very minimal looting, and then there was a little bit more every day before that. But fortunately, as far as I can tell, and we've been monitoring the scanner all day, and of course we've been live here over downtown. Very few cases of looting today. It has mostly been exactly what you're looking at right now: peaceful protest here on the streets of Los Angeles. Really, just people who are out here. They're frustrated. And they want change. They want change from our police department here in the city of Los Angeles. They want change for police departments throughout the country, including Minnesota, where George Floyd tragically lost his life in an altercation with authorities. But in addition to changes for the police department, there's other things that people are calling for that are out here, including asking for the dismissal of DA Jackie Lacey. We've seen a number of those signs, and we've also seen some signs asking for the defunding of the police. And we heard in the press conference with Mayor Eric Garcetti a few minutes ago that there will be some cuts in funding to the LAPD. Show you guys something. I was just looking out the window while I was holding the shot of the crowd. I wanted to show you this street. It's only about a block over from City Hall, just to the west. I'll try to get you the exact name, but it's just one block over. And the reason it drew my attention was that there's just so many police vehicles on this street, in addition to the National Guard. So we have a mix of police officers, sheriff's deputies, and National Guard on that street. curfew tonight, and it's a little earlier, or rather, it's a little later. Pardon me. It's a little later than what we've had in days past. So the last few days, our curfew here in the city of Los Angeles has coincided with the curfew of the county of Los Angeles, and it has been 6 p.m. So that's 6 o'clock to 6 a.m. in the morning. The curfew has been adjusted for today, and it is a little bit later. And I want to check something real quick. Okay, perfect. I wanted to check what time it would be over. So the LA County curfew, I repeat, is from 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. So that is if you are in the county of Los Angeles, not necessarily the city of Los Angeles, but the county of Los Angeles. And then the city of Los Angeles, they also have a curfew tonight. I believe that one's going to start a little bit earlier. I think that one is at 9 o'clock. So I believe it's... go ahead, Jack. Oh, great. Oh, no worries. You were missed. Yes, we're in the primary shift now, so we're all good. And let me check with Sarah. I'll give you a fuel update. Correct. Yeah, Grand Park, just west of City Hall. Sarah, how are we on fuel? Hour and a half left. Jack, on the microwave, we have an hour and a half left. That's 90 minutes. They looped back and returned and joined this crowd. So this is it. You're looking at everything just coming together here in front of City Hall. And I checked the freeway as well. We still have officers acting as a barrier to the freeway, and there's no one attempting to get on the freeway. No problem. And for all of you who are continuing to watch us online, we of course thank you for your viewership. I was just speaking to Jack Noyes over at the assignment desk at NBC. He is the person who provides us with a lot of the information that we report and sends us to the locations where things are going on. So our assignment was to come over here to City Hall to take over for News Shop 4 Bravo. Gil Avis was overhead for a couple hours and then departed to go get some fuel. So we took over at that point, and it just so happened to be that is when we also had an earthquake take place. So in a little bit of time, we've already had a lot of excitement up here in News Shop 4 Alpha. But we continue to watch this crowd here on the steps of City Hall. This is the west side of the building, and this is the building where Mayor Eric Garcetti has his office. And he does live in the Getty House in the Hancock Park area. And yesterday, thousands of people flocked to his home over there. It was a crowd numbering in the thousands for sure. Probably about as many people as we see now outside of the steps of City Hall. And a lot of the people that were over there were asking for the defunding of the police. They were also advancing the cause of Black Lives Matter. And we understand that there was an additional group that went over there today. Not as large as one we saw yesterday, but there were protesters outside of the mayor's home today as well. It's right out my door. So we're showing you the LAPD headquarters on Spring and First. We had looked at it a few minutes ago, and the crowd was basically just that little cluster of people that you see right there in the middle of the screen. But since then, and it was only about 10 minutes ago, I think, since we last checked, you can tell that the crowd has grown. And it seems like some of the people that were actually in front of City Hall are starting to make their way over here to LAPD headquarters. You can see that there are officers out here. They're just standing in almost a straight line there and just watching the protesters. Of course, we can't hear if there's a conversation going on, but we can at least interpret the body language here. It looks like the crowd that we were watching initially, that we estimated to be about 50, has probably grown closer to 100. And again, they're just outside of the LAPD headquarters right here on Spring and First, which just so happens to be directly south of City Hall. And it is at City Hall where we see the thousands of people that have gathered on Spring Street on the west side of City Hall, just outside the steps of the building. On those steps there are some police officers. We can't necessarily see them from this angle, but essentially that little overhang where the flags are, we do see some officers standing there. The crowd hasn't really diminished since we arrived on scene to replace Gil Levis in News Chopper 4 Bravo at about 6:30. But it was incredibly, despite how large it looks now, it was even larger earlier today during the 4 o'clock hour. I'm going to push in on this crowd here because it looks like there's something going on right in the middle. Perhaps we have a speaker, and it looks like that is exactly what is going on. It appears to be a young woman there with a bullhorn in hand and reading what looks to be like a prepared script there. You can see everyone intently listening there in a semicircle. And now some clapping. And perhaps we'll see somebody else come up. You can tell the speaker is very emotional, kind of wiping away tears. Feeling the love of the crowd as she continues on with her speech. So that's the basically the northern side of the group, and then we've got the heart of the group here, the bigger group of people just outside of the steps of City Hall, and then we've got additional people in the Graham Park area just to the west. A lot of these people are just kind of taking a break, sitting on the grass. We do see some people leaving. You see people heading westbound. I don't believe that they're leaving as a large group, or rather perhaps just leaving the immediate area to get to their vehicles so that they can get home before curfew starts. We do have some time though, more time than we've had in the last few days, because the last few days curfew had been at 6 o'clock, but now the county-wide curfew doesn't start until 10 o'clock tonight. this vehicle just pulled up there, just north of City Hall on Temple Street, and looks like the women who are in the car brought water bottles with them to share with the crowd. It's been a hot day today out here in Southern California. I know that there may be some viewers from outside of our viewing area, and I gotta tell you, today was a hot day. It was the hottest day of the week. Easily anywhere in between the 90 to 100 range. So those waters will be very much appreciated by the people who are still out here. Fortunately, now the buildings are providing some shade, cooling things down a bit for the crowd down there. And it looks like we have a little bit of a dance party going on right here at the intersection of Spring and Temple. We actually saw a large group of protesters dancing yesterday as well, and they were doing a line dance over in the Hancock Park area just outside of Mayor Garcetti's house. So we have noticed that these protesters over the past few days have used dance as a way to bring the crowd closer together and just give them that unison, just to add to that universal voice that they're looking for as they continue to call for change. On the scanner, and I hear that more units from the LAPD are being directed to the area, and this is of course in anticipation for that curfew that is coming up. So far though, we haven't witnessed any arrests today, which is just such a fresh of breath air compared to what we've seen over the last few days. There were several hundred arrests in the Hollywood area. Most of them were for curfew violations. Some, unfortunately, though, were for looting and other criminal behavior. But for the most part, the arrests that we did witness, especially in the Koreatown area near 8th and Crenshaw, we saw hundreds of people get arrested there. Most of those arrests were for curfew violations. And yesterday, the curfew was a lot earlier. Again, that was at 6 o'clock. Today, they pushed it back a little bit. It's 9 for City of LA and 10 for County of LA. So that does buy people a little bit of time to get home and gives them a few extra hours to continue to be out here protesting and continue to make their voices heard outside of the steps of City Hall or wherever they are in the County of LA seeking justice. Got a call there from our assignment desk, and they're telling us that we are going to have to depart here for just a little bit, but we of course want to thank you for tuning in to our feed from News Shop Report Alpha. Again, I'm Eliana Marino along with my pilot Sarah Garabetian. Don't forget NBC4 News at 11 o'clock. In a couple hours,
take you back out now to Hancock Park. This is the view from News Chopper 4 Bravo. Protesters are outside the mayor's house right now. And NBC4's Eric Leonard joins us to talk about this protest. Eric.
Well, Carolyn and Michael, the mayor's residence is a symbol that's drawn a lot of attention from protesters who have been upset with the conduct of police officers in Los Angeles. Mayor Garcetti, or any mayor, is the person who helps to select, probably the person with the most influence in selecting the chief of police for the city of LA. And as we've heard in police commission meetings, including the one earlier today, there's a tremendous amount of frustration and anger that's been directed towards LAPD Chief Michael Moore, before him LAPD Chief Charlie Beck, regarding the treatment of officers who are involved in police shootings that many activists and protesters and many members of the public may think were unjust, unjustified, or outright criminal. And there has been a demand at the commission meetings, certainly demands in public. If you may remember, a few years ago, there was an Occupy encampment that was set up outside City Hall demanding the removal of the police chief. And some of that has now been directed towards Mayor Garcetti because a person in the mayor's office has a lot more say over who the police chief is. And the primary complaint is that the Los Angeles Police Department fails to adequately punish officers that many of the activists believe behaved unlawfully at work. The LAPD has been involved in a number of controversial shootings, but far and away, both the LA police commissioners, whose job it is, they're the civilians appointed by the mayor also, the commissioners rule that the trigger pulling, the ultimate split-second decision to take somebody's life is in policy. And more often than not, the LA County District Attorney's Office is asked to weigh in on whether or not the officer's behavior was criminal. And it's really unheard of for police officers to be prosecuted for these cases that many of these activists believe were unjust. So the reason the mayor's house has the symbolism, the reason it is a focal point of these demonstrations, is because the mayor hires the police chief, the mayor appoints the police commissioners, and all of those together, the chief and the commissioners, are responsible for deciding whether or not Los Angeles Police Department officers behaved within policy or violated the department rules when they used force against members of the public. So this is not the first time there's been demonstrations there. There have been a number of them, not all of them from this group of protesters. In fact, it was just a couple of weeks back during the coronavirus lockdown, when people were being encouraged to stay at home, that there was a large demonstration that got a little bit raucous for about an hour from business owners and people who were demanding that Mayor Garcetti lift the orders that were causing so many businesses to remain closed for weeks, if not months on end. Just in the last few minutes, we've been hearing from some of our law enforcement contacts that the LAPD has asked for a lot more officers to head over to the mayor's residence, including members of the Metropolitan Division. A unit of Metropolitan Division is responsible for protecting the mayor. They're the plainclothes security people that you see with the mayor. They've also sent a number of other officers to the Getty House in anticipation of keeping any protesters off the property or away from climbing any of the gates. But as we're looking at these pictures, these demonstrators are simply sitting in the street. There is probably a lot of noise down there, but so far it doesn't look like there's anyone who's tried to cause any kind of confrontation with the officers who guard this house. Nonetheless, LAPD contacts are telling us that they're sending a few dozen officers over there to keep the peace.
All right, Eric, we appreciate that. You talk about noise. Well, in fact, we may hear some. We have NBC4